grace, what have you done? Murdered for me on that cross, accused in absence of wrong, my sin washed away in your blood. Too much to make sense of it all. I know that your love breaks my fall. The scandal of grace, you died in my place, so my soul will live. Oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever your home's in my heart. We sing death, where is your sting? Your power is as dead as my sin. The cross has taught me to live. And mercy, my heart now to sing. We sing. The day and its trouble shall go on. I know that your strength is enough. The scandal of grace, you died in my place, so my soul will live. Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever your home's in my heart. Are you ready? Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever your home's in my heart. We sing, it's all because of you, Jesus. It's all we say. Because of you, Jesus. It's all because of your love that my soul will live. We sing, oh, it's all because of you, Jesus. It's all because of you, Jesus. It's all because of your love that my soul will live. We sing together, oh, it's because of you, Jesus. We believe in church because of his blood, because of his mercy, because of his grace. We will live. Oh, we sing. So we sing that one more time. 'Cause oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know. Jesus, there's no one beside. Forever the hope in my
What do you wish you exhibited more self-control over?
Overeating sweets, especially in Geraldine's office. She always has this bowl of chocolates, and every time I walk by, it's a test of my self-control. And a lot of times I lose.
Cookies.
Cookies? I mean, what else is it?
What is it with this office? What's in the water?
You can give me cake, you can give me pie, you can give me rich desserts. I'll ask, where are the cookies?
I like Mexican food. I just can't help myself there.
You literally are uncontrollable when Mexican food is present.
Oh, yeah.
I work out too much. Like, I put everything else second in my life to it, including wife and kids.
You heard it here first, folks.
Driving with more self-control.
Yes. What do you wish others exhibited more self-control over?
Slow drivers not in the fast lane of the freeway.
Yes.
Their tempers, I guess.
That's a great answer. What do you wish you exhibited more self-control over within your life?
My temper.
You guys make a great pair.
Maybe more self-control with saying yes all the time. Sometimes it's okay to say no.
What do you wish you exhibited more self-control over?
Myself.
I think everything.
Everything.
Going to bed earlier.
Yes. Is there anything in your life that you wish you had more self-control over?
Love.
You love people too much?
Yeah.
I eat poorly. I just had 15 donut holes for breakfast, so.
I think criticism of other people when they do not know where those people are coming from and what they're dealing with.
The understanding of other people's needs and wants.
Nice, thoughtful answers. No one's like, I have a problem with Oreos.
So I was pastoring at Corona when I turned 40. And in church, they gave me 40 dozen cookies. 40 dozen. Took me a week to eat all those cookies. It was rough. Those are some righteous people. Self-control. Wow. So this week, an online journal called Ink had a piece, the title of which was along these lines: What Warren Buffett says is the one word that differentiates between the truly successful people and the rest of us. Well, I mean, with a title like that, I had to find out what it was, although I had a pretty good suspicion of what it was. I don't know if I'd run across what Buffett said before or just living life taught it to me, and I think you have a pretty good suspicion of what it is as well. But just to make certain that we're all on the same page, Marcel Schwantz, the writer of the piece, says this: Warren Buffett has captured our imagination with business wisdom that defies conventional thinking. One infamous Buffettism has garnered a lot of debate since he first said it years ago. It's a quote about the difference between successful and really successful people. Here's what Buffett said verbatim. The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. No to almost everything. Now, I don't know if you agree with Buffett or not. I think I agree with him. He's a billionaire. And it may surprise you to know I'm not. But if he said it, he's probably got some good reasons for saying it. But almost as though he had writers that were doubting it, Schwantz says just a couple of paragraphs later something about another very well-known name, Steve Jobs. He quotes Steve Jobs at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference in 1997 as saying this: people think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. I'm as proud of the things we haven't done as the things I have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. Always remember that devoting attention and focus to something, whether it's an investment opportunity, a new product launch, or a new hobby, means taking time away from something else. Saying no. Saying no to all kinds of things. They say to almost everything and almost everyone. That's the difference between really successful and successful. It's a good thought, but it's a hard thing to do. So a member of our congregation, Marion Wagner, came to my office several years ago and said, I know you have a problem with saying no, so I'm going to give you something that's going to really help you. So just keep this on your desk, which I have done from that time to this. And when somebody asks you one of the things that you know you really shouldn't be doing, I want you to use it. So somebody says, Pastor, can you do this devotional at our ministry? It'll only take a few minutes. You just push the button on this and it says, no. And if somebody says, would you come and do this particular service at our ministry? No. And can you do this? No. So I've kept this little button on my desk and thought, okay, this is my answer to my inability to say no. And it's only been marginally helpful because it's hard to push the button. In fact, I was talking with a good friend of mine some years ago. His name is Ivan Blazin. And he and I were kind of playfully commiserating about the fact that it's hard to say no to things. And he said to me finally, I figured out a way to say no without actually having to say it. I said, really, what do you do? He says, somebody asked me to do something. And I say to them, my answer to your question is the opposite of yes. I don't ever have to say it. It's hard to say no. And yet, those who have done some pretty amazing things in life say the key is learning to say no. So with that kind of echoing in our thoughts, we come to the last virtue in the list of the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. And it's something called self-control. I mean, who wants to talk about that? Who wants to have to talk about saying no? But let's read it. Galatians chapter 5 says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things, there is no law. So let's start with that last line, that last sentence. We've read it probably most weeks throughout this series, and yet you may have wondered what it means. I was wondering what it meant. Against such things, there is no law. Who would want to pass a law against that? Well, to kind of put it in the context, and to paraphrase a bit what Paul is saying, here's what's going on when he writes to the Galatian churches. They are at odds, really at war, about the role of the Mosaic law and especially circumcision. Paul is saying it's not necessary, you don't have to do it. And they are saying, oh yes it is. Some of the people who have come to them are saying it's absolutely necessary. In fact, if you stop doing it, that's going to be the camel's nose in the tent, and you stop doing it, everything is going to go downhill from there. You're going to let all kinds of things into your church. It's going to end up in a really bad place. You got to stand firm on this. And Paul says, really? So you're saying in order to have the smiling face of God, I have to do all of these things that come from Moses? Seriously? And you think that if we stop circumcising, that's going to be the beginning of all the ills? Well, let me tell you something, Paul says. Let me tell you what it looks like to live in the freedom of Jesus. To live a life of freedom in the Spirit. Rather than leading where you say it's going to lead, it will lead to people who are filled with love and joy and peace and all the other virtues in his list of the fruit of the Spirit. That's where it will lead. This is not the camel's nose in the tent in an evil direction. In fact, you can't pass enough laws to create people like the people the Spirit will create. The purpose of law is to restrain evil. There's no need for a law against this kind of person. They don't worry about that because they are the kind of characters that will transform the world. So that's what Paul is driving at in that phrase. But now let's look at the last one. There have been 8 others in the list. This one is self-control. So what is it, Paul? You say self-control is one of the virtues in the fruit of the Spirit. What exactly do you mean by self-control? So I wonder if Paul happened to be alive today, I wonder if he wouldn't tell us, well, look at the world around you. Ask some people who know about such things in the world around you. Maybe they can help you understand why it's important and what it is. All right, Paul. So maybe we'll ask A.J. Jacobs. A.J. Jacobs might be a familiar name to you. He's an American journalist whose penchant for doing self-experiments has become almost legendary. In other words, he tries out all kinds of things just to see what it's like and to see where it leads. From his own website, I want to read you what his self-description is. He says this: on a mission to improve every aspect of my life, from love to work to happiness, I became a human guinea pig. I immersed myself in a series of radical lifestyle experiences. I changed the way I thought, talked, and looked. I followed old wisdom and new science. I saw the world from the eyes of a woman. I followed the wisdom of George Washington. I outsourced my life. I engaged, I'm afraid to say, in public nudity, not all at the same time. These projects wreaked havoc on my life and drove both my wife and me to the brink of insanity, but also gave me fascinating insights. And that's exactly what he did. He outsourced his life. So he hired some people around the world in India to handle every single aspect of his life, from answering emails to answering phone calls to paying bills to doing everything else they could possibly do, just to find out what is that like. He spent a year trying to follow every command he could find in the Bible. From growing a beard to stoning an adulterer, which is an interesting story in and of itself, to every other command he could find. About drove people crazy. But the one that interests me today is the month, just 1 month, that he spent in a movement called the Radical Honesty Movement. So in case you've never heard of the Radical Honesty Movement, the Radical Honesty Movement believes that you should never tell a lie, ever. Now, some might say, okay, well, that's good enough, that's fine. But that's not all they say. The Radical Honesty Movement says, if you have a thought, you should express it. Whatever goes through here comes out here. And you say everything to anybody. If you think it. You know, you're kind of ugly. You know, you got a really big nose. That dress really makes you look fat. Can you imagine? I want you to listen to Jacob's description of what that month in his life was like. He says, this was the worst month of my life. I had to spend the following weeks apologizing to everyone I offended. But it was also one of the most illuminating. So as I'm looking online trying to find out what people thought about this, I come across this chat board where people who tried it themselves were posting their experiences. Listen to one person who posted, who said, if you haven't figured it out already, this is a terrible, terrible idea. I tried a variant of this for about 2 years in college, and it caused way more problems than it solved. Actually, I don't think it solved any problems at all. In other words, do away with any self-control when it comes to what comes out of your mouth. You think it, you say it. Doesn't matter who it is. Radical honesty. No self-control on your words. So we say to Paul, so is that an evidence of the need for self-control? He said, I think so. But that's not principally what I'm talking about. You can talk to James about that. So what are you talking about, Paul? Just keep asking. And so we ask one Tom Brady. We talked to Tom Brady, winning a Super Bowl quarterback ever, is going to retire from the NFL straight into the nursing home. He's that old. And we talk to him, and I say to him, okay, Tom, what do you think? Whoa, he says, Mr. Brady, do you? Cowboys fan. I said, okay, Mr. Brady. What does self-control look like in your life? He said, well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. You're talking about the fact that depending on where I am in my training, I drink 12 to 25 glasses of water a day? I'm like, 25? You can't even get 25 glasses of water. That's a lot of water. It's what I need, he says. In fact, he says, maybe what you're talking about is the fact that my chef, you have one of those? The fact that my chef says to me, you know, Mr. Brady, 80% of what you all eat in this household are vegetables. Vegetables. I mean, it's just like you. 80% of what you eat is vegetables, right? So Brady says, maybe that's what you're talking about, having the self-control, the ability to do that. We're like, wow, that's impressive. Paul says, not really what I had in mind. So what do you have in mind, Paul? What is this thing you call self-control? Why did you put it on the list? Why did you put it last on the list? So we keep asking. We go to one Walter Mischel. Walter Mischel has become famous because of an experiment he performed back in around 1970. It's become an experiment that's so well known, it's known by lay people even, it's known on YouTube. It's become a very well-known experiment. It's called the marshmallow test. You've seen it. So what Mischel did was he set a table in a basically empty room, put a chair or two, depending if he had one or two kids there in front of it, brought kids in about 4 years of age, set them in the chair, and in front of them, he placed a plate with a marshmallow on it. You know, marshmallow just dripping with sugar. And he said to them, okay, now, if you can sit here and not eat that marshmallow while I'm gone, if you wait till I come back to eat it, I'll give you 2 when I get back. But if you just can't hold it, then press this button, it'll ring a bell, and I'll come right back. And so then a video camera captures the kids. And they're squirming, and they're just itching. You can see they get closer. They smell it. One of them looks up to heaven like, oh, God, please help me. And they're trying to hold out to get that second marshmallow. Some of them press the button as quickly as 1 minute later. I can't take this. Boom, press the button. I get to eat the marshmallow. Some of them delayed as long as 15 minutes before pressing the button. David Brooks, columnist for the New York Times, writes about Mischel's marshmallow test. He says this: the children who waited longer went on to get higher SAT scores. They got into better colleges and had, on average, better adult outcomes. The children who rang the bell the quickest were more likely to become bullies. They received the worst teacher and parental evaluation 10 years on and were more likely to have drug problems at age 32. Mischel concluded that children may be taught that it pays to work toward the future instead of living for instant gratification. So, Paul, is that what you're talking about? Resist the marshmallow so I can get 2 instead of just 1? And maybe Paul would say, well, you're kind of getting into the idea. That's not fully it yet. So what is it, Paul? This thing you call self-control. Why is it last on the list? Well, maybe we ought to talk to Marco Iacobani. He's an MD, PhD at the UCLA Brain Imaging Center. He's done a lot of work in these areas, and so no wonder one of the online sources went to him and interviewed him, asking him questions about such things, including the question, why is it that some people are able to manage their anger in a fairly productive way and others just go off? They can't manage their anger in any way at all. What is your thought about that? And here's how Iacobani answered that question, a really important question. Just on the way to church this morning, I came in really early. It was quiet. It was dark. I'm coming on the ramp to the freeway, making a curve. This guy's trying to pass me on the left-hand side. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Wasn't I preaching on today? Oh, yeah, that's right. So what about it, Jacobani? Why can we sometimes control it and other times not? Here was his answer. About a year ago, he says, I was at the World Economic Forum, and we had a dinner with talks on intelligence. University of Michigan professor of social psychology Richard Nisbett, the world's greatest authority on intelligence, plainly said, this is what he said. He'd rather have his son be high in self-control than intelligence. This is a preeminent authority on intelligence. I'd rather my son have better self-control than higher intelligence. According to Nisbett, self-control is a key to a well-functioning life. So, Paul, we're beginning to get why you might have said that, but we want to make certain that we understand what self-control is. We're curious, why did you put it at the bottom of the list? I mean, honestly, when I read a list of 9 things, it's tempting to think that item number 1, in this case, love, is the most important one on the list. Item number 2 is next most important. Item number 3, and so forth. Item number 9, by that time, you're just throwing things in. Oh, yeah, I thought of this. Let me throw this in. Is that what you're saying? Is it a matter of priority? What exactly do you mean when you say self-control? Are the experts right? If you want to succeed in life, you have to learn to say no to most of the requests people make, to say no to most of the opportunities that present themselves, and to focus down on just the one most important reality. Paul, is that what you're saying? Well, here's what's curious. There's a very clear meaning to what Paul says in the wording as well as in the context of the New Testament world. So one sentence from New Testament scholar Walter Hansen helps us understand where Paul is going. Listen to what Hansen says. Self-control is the opposite of self-indulgence. Those who are Spirit-led will have the strength to say no to themselves. Those who are Spirit-led will have the strength to say no to themselves. Not so much to other people, not so much to other opportunities, but the hardest no some of us will ever say is the no we say to ourselves. And that's what Paul is driving at. If you think about it, you may conclude that that is maybe the most important no to ever speak. Because as you start to grow up, as you start to come to maturity, both physical as well as emotional, and then relational, and certainly spiritual, you begin to realize that part of the maturation process, part of being a mature person in any of those categories, including the spiritual, means I simply cannot do everything I feel like doing, every whim that comes up within me, every temptation that presents itself, every opportunity I want to latch onto. I cannot do them all and be a mature, healthy person. I can't eat every cookie I want to eat and expect to be healthy. I can't buy everything I want to buy and not end up swimming in debt. I can't speak every word that crosses my mind and not have fractured relationships. I can't spend all the time I want to online and not affect myself and the others around me. I simply cannot do everything I feel like doing, everything I want to do, and still expect to live a healthy life, physically, emotionally, relationally, or spiritually. I have to learn to say no to me, which is probably the hardest no we'll ever speak. I mean, who wants to talk about this? Who wants to talk about self-control? When I saw this item on the list, I thought, man, could we make this an 8-part series? and just kind of say, well, he just kind of added that one. But we're moving on to the next thing. Who wants to talk about self-control? Saying no to me. And yet we keep reading the New Testament. And we pause on that passage, maybe the most sublime passage on humility in all of literature, certainly in all of Scripture, in Philippians 2. It also came from Paul's pen. When he talks about Jesus and his humiliation by becoming incarnate, he said, Jesus, who was equal with God, who had every right to hang on to his rights, let them go. And stepped down the starry stair steps of the sky, wrapping himself in human flesh and becoming obedient to death on a cross. In other words, he said no to himself, to a legitimate right. I have the right to claim my prerogative as God and let that planet perish on its own. But he said no. And that's why we're here. That's why we have hope. We keep reading. And we read Paul in 1 Corinthians 9 as he's trying to describe spiritual self-discipline. In order to do that, he draws on an image, an athletic image from his world. He uses the same word he uses over here in Galatians 5, self-control, same Greek word. And he says, any athlete who wants to win at the competition, either the race or the boxing match, which are the two images he uses, any athlete who wants to win goes into strict training. That's how the NIV renders it. But it's the same Greek word, has self-control. Tom Landry, a coach years ago for the Cowboys, was one time asked, what does it mean to be a coach in the NFL? Can you give us a definition of a coach? And here's what he said. Being a coach, he said, is the art of getting men to do what they don't want to do so that they can become what they want to be. That's profound for a football coach. But it's true to what Paul is saying. He's using that image of strict discipline, of self-control. The very thing most of us, and I include myself, really don't want to do. The hardest no we will ever speak is the no we speak to ourselves. Self-control. But we asked Paul, why did you put it last on the list? Were you meaning for it to be kind of an appendage, an add-on, a PS? Or is there something else? New Testament scholars suggest that he placed it last on the list because it was the most important in terms of implementing the other fruits. That without this last one, you're not going to be able to grow any of these other 8 before it. Not possible. You say, what do you mean? Well, think of this coming week. You have that moment with that special person in your life, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whoever it is. You have that moment when you want to take the actions of love to improve your relations with them, as the 12-step group people put it. You want to show your love. You want to grow that first fruit of the Spirit, that love. Grow that love in your relationship with them. Yet you realize that if you're going to speak it into their lives in the way they need to hear it, you're going to have to do something yourself that you don't want to do. Give up your time. Give up your free afternoon. Spend some money you'd rather not spend. It's going to cost you something. So in order to love, you're going to have to say no to yourself. Self-control. Or what about peace? Peace is one of the virtues of the fruit of the Spirit. You encounter that person who hurt you, who damaged you, that person over whom you've had sleepless nights. You're so angry at them, and your desire is to not only set the record straight, but pay them back. I'm done with this kind of treatment. And then you run into them. And when you run into them, you remember what you read that morning in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And you take a breath and you say, oh God, I don't want to do this. I do want to be a peacemaker though. Do I really have to give up getting even? Do I have to say no to that part of me that wants to set the record straight? Do I really have to speak the truth in love? And if you want to be a person of peace, you will need self-control. Saying no to yourself. What about patience? You're caring for your sister's kids. You're caring for your own kids. And you've about had it in the last 6 minutes, 7, 8, 9, 10 times they've said, please, please, please. And you're about to turn around and say, look, I'm done with that. Scream and yell at them. Get them upset. Let them go to their room crying. Said by a true parent. And yet you think, patience is one of the virtues of the fruit of the Spirit. And you end up having to say no to an inclination that you have that's really strong. Self-control. Maybe Paul put it at the end because he realized in order to implement all of the others, you will need this last one. Because without it, you will not grow the other 8. And that's challenging. Because when I read that, I say, good heavens, that's a high standard. There's no way I can do that. And then Paul says, now you're starting to get it. That's why it's a fruit of the Spirit. It's not something you're going to do by willpower or backbone. It's going to be something you're going to do as you surrender your life to the Spirit of God who moves in and who continues to form you into the image of Jesus. That is the power. The only real way you can most fully and authentically say no to the person to whom it is the hardest to say it. So what about Buffett? What about Jobs? What about all the others who say you got to say no to most everything, to most everyone? Is that what Paul is talking about? It's not Paul's main point, even though what they say is very true. Paul's main point is you have to be honest with yourself and say it to yourself, because only in that way will you grow toward maturity in Christ. It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's a result of your surrender to Jesus. So if you're anything like me, you will end up saying, God, you got to help me. Can't do this. I cannot do it on my own. Paul says, you're okay. Because the Spirit will form you into Christ's image with your willing participation. And you will grow His fruit. Gracious God, thank you. Thank you so much that you give us an indication of what the life of freedom, the life of the Spirit is. Lord, grow in us that fruit. Give us the power that only the Spirit can bring. And in the name of Jesus, we will continue to thank you. Amen.